Hello, BookTube. Who's ready for another shelf tour? We're slowly working our way through biography, and we're almost at the end of this one bookcase. We'll start with James Boswell. This is a fairly new book called Boswell's Enlightenment, in which the author analyzes Boswell not so much as the biographer of Johnson, but rather as an intellectual figure in the Enlightenment in his own right. It's a thin book. It's an approach to Boswell that could easily have absorbed 600 pages, and it's such a good book that I ended up wishing it had. But I kept it anyway because I was impressed. Then we have an older book. This is by Kenneth Muir. This is The Life and Letters of Sir Thomas Wyatt. It's from an old English literature series that did lives and letters. And even though in the old days life and letters really meant introduction, place that anybody could jump on, it's an excellent book, but I think you'd want the other Wyatt biography that I mentioned earlier as a place to start if you don't know anything about Thomas Wyatt, and it's the 21st century, so you don't know anything about Thomas Wyatt. I am a big fan. And then there's this thing, something that you'll all be familiar with. This is Dutch by Edmund Morris. This is his biography of President Reagan. He was given unparalleled access to the president, and in the expectation that he would write just a normal official life. And he found that he couldn't do that. He found after hours and hours and hours that Ronald Reagan was, in some very fundamental sense, impenetrable as a person. A bafflement to a biographer, even a biographer on the scene in the Oval Office. So instead of handing back the money or biting the bullet and just lying, he wrote a strange, surrealistic book. Not a place to read your first biography of Ronald Reagan, but in my opinion, one of the most brilliant and odd tributes ever paid to an American president. Critics at the time didn't know what to make of it and were mostly ungenerous. I was a little disappointed in what was then not my profession at the time. I don't know that I can recommend it. But if you're coming to the subject cold, if you already know something about Reagan, if you've read another biography of him, then I wholeheartedly recommend it. Then our next one is American Ulysses. This is by Ronald White, who I recommended doing a biography of Abraham Lincoln, and his biography of Grant was really good too. That's why I kept it. And then we have a masterpiece. This is Juliet Barker's big communal life of the Brontes, not just the sisters, this famous portrait on the cover, but also that blur in the middle, Branwell, the boy, the Bronte brother, who is given equal treatment, and it's just a wonderful combination of biography and literary study in a way that the Brontes don't always get. So it's fantastic. And then we've got this, My Wars Are Laid Away in Books. This is a great biography of Emily Dickinson, a very tough author to write a biography of, and yet there have been hundreds of them, and this is, in my opinion, the best one. And then we have this. This is Harold Acton. This is Nancy Mitford. It's his memoir of Nancy Mitford, and it's not meant to be an official full-dress biography. It's a memoir, so he's able to relate tittle-tattle and unsubstantiated gossip, and it's just delightful. And we have, you'll notice, if you've noticed on this shelf, I'm not a big fan of Winston Churchill. And I don't usually, there are hundreds of biographies of him every year, and I don't usually keep any of them. But I kept this one. This is Jonathan Rose. It's the literary Churchill. And it's a study of Churchill as an author and a reader and a reviewer, and it is fantastic. Just fantastic. And there's also a very sexy blurb. A masterpiece. A more mentally nimble version of Churchill the man than any previous portrait. Nobody should miss it. Very sexy. That critic sounds very sexy. And then we have this thing here. This is Shakespeare and the Earl of Southampton. It's a biography of the Earl of Southampton. That's the long-haired himbo on the cover. But who was Shakespeare's patron in the early part of his career. But it's also a wonderful study of the two of them together, of their working relationship. And I have lots of Shakespeare books, but that's one of my favorite ones. Then we have a biographer that I want to recommend. I have almost all of his books, and his name is Frank McGlynn, and this is his biography of Robert Louis Stevenson, which is, of all the books written on Stevenson, the best one, and this is also one of the few books I have that survived the great Dalrymple Street fire. We'll meet Frank McGlynn again. I think we've seen him already in this bookshelf tour, but he's fantastic. If you see him writing a biography, then you will be entertained. And then we have this. This is more of a study than a biography. So again, I don't know what it's doing here. This is Byron and Greek Love. The subtitle is Homophobia in 19th Century England. And it's a study of Byron's homosexuality. And it's not a glancing study, and it's not 2 entries in an 800-page biography, and it's not coded either with bisexuality or with offense to public morals. It's just about Byron and homosexuality, about Byron's attraction to men, specifically to teenage boys. And it comes the closest that I've ever seen a mainstream Byron book do to making a case that it was that drove him from England, not a scandal with Aurora Leigh or Augusta, not a scandal with his family members, but scandals that were about to break of a homosexual nature, which could have put him in jail or had him executed, and he knew that. And most of the documents and a good deal of the first-hand information is gone, thoroughly suppressed. So you're shooting in the dark when you do it anyway. But I loved the author's approach to it. And then we have another Byron biography. This is by Michael Foote. It's The Politics of Paradise, and it's subtitled A Vindication of Byron. And it's also, again, not fully a biography, so I don't really know what it's doing here. But maybe I wanted all my Byron books together, although they're not. So anyway, the author, it's the author's attempt to make an intellectual case for Byron, who has fallen so far out of fashion now that he's almost shoulder to shoulder with John Dryden. Nobody reads Byron for pleasure anymore, and that's a shame. And when you read him, censorious critics have given the idea that he was a versifier, that he wasn't a serious poet. And this is a sort of a vindication of his life and art. Very, very good stuff. Then another poet, this time no one doubts his ability. This is James Merrill, Life and Art by Langdon Hammer. A great, big, definitive biography of Jimmy Merrill that will stand the test of time. It's a great book. And then we have a tiny thing. This is Paul Brooks, 2 Park Street. This is also a review copy of his time here in Boston when Houghton Mifflin was located at 2 Park Street, in a grand old ramshackle office just off Boston Common. It's a delightful publishing memoir, one of the best that I've ever read. Then we have this. This is Henry Seidel Canby's Thoreau, his old biography of Henry David Thoreau. And the reason that it's called Henry Seidel Canby's Thoreau, the fact that it has that title should give you some indication of what he used to be like, of what Canby's cachet used to be. It used to be that he was the making point of a book, not the subject. And when you read this, or anything that he wrote, you will see why, because he is one heck of a writer. Just fantastic. Much as I hate to say it, because there's a great modern biography of Thoreau, but this is better. But we'll get to the modern one. We'll get to everything. And then we have a gem. If I've recommended it to any of you, you will smile when you see it. It's Dear Genius. These are the letters of Ursula Nordstrom, who was for years and years and years the head of the children's section of a major publishing group of Harper's, and who was known by her friends and some of her enemies as Ursula Maelstrom, because she was an endless font of enthusiasm and insight, and really single-handedly created the world of American children's literature in the modern era. And had a grand old time doing it. She had a way with authors. She had a way of spotting gold. She's thanked by more than one author in their dedication page as the person who kept them going. And a large rack of children's classics owe their existence to her. And her letters are wonderful. So, and then we have this thing. This also is fairly modern. This is Vivienne Forrester's Virginia Woolf: A Portrait. A very thin thing in the forest of Virginia Woolf biographies, and yet it is so good. Oh my God, it's so beautifully written and so insightful to Woolf, the person, the human. Can't recommend it high enough. And then the last one on this shelf for today is this thing. It's gigantic. It's Robert Massey's Peter the Great in this bright red old hardcover. His biography of Peter the Great that has never been equaled, has never been surpassed, and will never be equaled or surpassed. Just a stupendous modern biography, on which a lot of his that and Nicholas and Alexander, on which a lot of his reputation rests, and rightfully so. Although we've seen his Catherine the Great as well, which is also fantastic. And there you have it. That is another shelf on our way to the end of this bookcase. Where we'll go from there, I don't know. But we have one more shelf to do for this bookcase. We'll have made it all the way to the end. So thank you, BookTube, and I'll see you soon.